Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 306 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Emily Jashinsky joins us at 3:30. We'll talk about a little bit of slow pitch softball with Kamala Harris last night, and she struck out anyway. Ron Johnson joins us, the U.S. Senator, starting at 4 o'clock today. We'll talk to him about his work to get the answers on July 13th. J13, how did President Trump get shot in the head? Why did the Secret Service allow that to happen? Senator Johnson joins us. Congressman Andy Harris is here at 4:30. And at 5:30 from the Arlington GOP, Matthew Hurt is here ahead of a big event for early voting in Arlington tomorrow. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yes, just as a programming note for you, a reminder, an event tomorrow in Arlington at the courthouse plaza there. 8 a.m. early voting begins, as it does each day. And Corey and I and Matthew Hurt, we'll all be out there to party with you. If you're an Arlington voter and have not yet cast your ballot, please join us and cast your ballot there tomorrow morning. I want to get as many people out as we can for early voting. And if you'd just like to come hang out, you can do that too. We'll have coffee, donuts. We'll try to make them last this time. There's a Dunkin' Donuts right nearby, so the supply should be steady, one hopes. That's the plan for tomorrow. And so if you have some free time tomorrow morning, I'd love to see you, love to meet you, love to shake your hand, and cheer on America, tailgate the vote tomorrow morning at the Arlington Courthouse Plaza, 8 o'clock. Let me start with Eric Adams today. The New York City mayor has been indicted by the feds, by the Southern District of New York today, for a range of things that they allege that he did. That's the nature of an indictment, including conspiracy to commit wire fraud, to solicit foreign contributions, to accept bribes, solicitation of a contribution by a foreign national, bribery. There's some repetition to the counts here, but there are 5 charges in the indictment. And they accuse Eric Adams of, over the course of his political career in New York and as mayor of New York, accepting straw donations from Turkish interests and accepting free upgrades on Turkish Airlines to fly internationally to the tune of, they value the upgrades at something like $100,000, over a 6-figure upgrade situation for all of the flights he's taken. They say that he would buy the standard seat aboard the Turkish airline flight to whatever his destination was. He'd arrive at the airport, and Turkish Airlines would say, "Oh, Mr. Mayor, we've upgraded your seat. You're now flying business class. You're now flying top of the line internationally. You're going to have a great experience." And I've seen some of these really beautiful, first class experiences from a distance. I've watched them on YouTube, and they seem amazing. They seem amazing. I don't know what Turkish Airlines is like, but it does sound like a pretty luxurious experience to fly this way. And Eric Adams was able to do that, the feds allege, because they were giving him free upgrades. Free upgrades. Now, it doesn't strike me as all that surprising. Like, if you knew the mayor of New York City was boarding your flight and you were an airline, wouldn't you think, like, hey, maybe we could nudge this guy. Maybe if we've got some extra seats, maybe the mayor, maybe we'll give it to him. Maybe that could redound to our benefit. It wouldn't be unusual for a company to do that. But the feds allege that it was a part of a scheme to enhance Turkish interests, including the construction of a very tall Turkish consulate in New York City. And they also say that Eric Adams was taking a lot of donations that they were pretending to be small dollar donors in New York. And the reason they were pretending that would be straw donors, when you pretend to have a donor, you're exploiting a middleman. You call them a straw donor. They're actually making the donation on behalf of someone else. And that's because New York has this bizarro match system for contributions. So if I was living in New York, the way, as I understand it, and I wanted to contribute to, say, Eric Adams's campaign, if I gave him $250, according to New York's setup, they will match up to 8 times your contribution with taxpayer funds. Let me just point out, that sounds like an awful system. That sounds like such a New York Democrat system to begin with. So if I give $20, you're gonna times my donation by 8 by stealing from the taxpayers? What? What is this system? Anyway, so the feds say that Eric Adams was exploiting that system by taking all of these illegal foreign contributions. They would divvy them up between a bunch of straw donors, and they were able to milk the public match in order to get upwards of $10 million in taxpayer funds contributed to his campaign. That's what they're accusing him of. Meanwhile, Eric Adams is insisting that he's not guilty of anything. He says that, no, this is all a hit job, and it's all because I dared call out the Biden-Harris administration and the disaster that is the border. Here he is a year ago making those claims. Take a listen to this.
Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City. We're getting 10,000 migrants a month. One time we were just getting Venezuela. Now we're getting Ecuador. Now we're getting Russian-speaking coming through Mexico. Now we're getting Western Africa. Now we're getting people from all over the globe have made their minds up that they're going to come through the southern part of the border and come into New York City.
That was September of last year that he said that. Interestingly, in the indictment, there a lot of the relevant dates here when they were seeking devices from Eric Adams and trying to get a hold of all of his records, those dates are in November, so they would be a couple months later of some of the investigative steps taking place after the audio that you just heard going after Eric Adams. Adams last night said that he is being targeted by the federal government.
My fellow New Yorkers, it is now my belief that the federal government intends to charge me with crimes.
Which they announced today.
If so, these charges will be entirely false, based on lies. But they would not be surprising. I always knew that if I stood my ground for all of you, that I would be a target. And a target I became. For months, leaks and rumors have been aimed at me in an attempt to undermine my credibility and paint me as guilty. Just this past week, they searched the home of our new police commissioner, looking for documents from 20 years ago, just 1 week after he joined my administration. Enough. I will fight these injustices with every ounce of my strength and my spirit.
He went on to say that he is being targeted because of the border crisis.
If I'm charged, I know I am innocent. I will request an immediate trials so the New Yorkers can hear the truth. New Yorkers know my story. They know where I come from. I have been fighting injustice my entire life. That fight has continued as your mayor. Despite our pleas, when the federal government did nothing as its broken immigration policies overloaded our shelter system with no relief,
man, oh man,
I put the people of New York before party and politics.
There's so many interesting things happening here, aren't there? So many interesting things. So he's being charged by the Southern District of New York. The indictment includes all sorts of details that are very highly suggestive of the fact that they certainly seem to have him dead to rights on some of the charges that they leveled against him, including communications demonstrating his knowledge of schemes to take money from foreign illegal contributions. There's a hilarious paragraph in the indictment that I just read just a little shortly before coming to air here. It's on page 48 of the indictment. It describes how they obtained Eric Adams' cell phone. They say on November 6th of last year, FBI agents executed a search warrant for the electronic devices used by Eric Adams, the defendant. Although Adams was carrying several electronic devices, including 2 cell phones, he was not carrying his personal cell phone, which is the device that he was using to communicate about the conduct that's described in this indictment. When Adams produced his personal cell phone the next day in response to a subpoena, it was locked, such that the device required a password to open. Adams claimed that after he had learned about the investigation into his conduct, he changed the password on November 5th. This would have been 1 day before, basically 2 days before they actually got the phone from him, the personal phone. He says he changed the password on November 5th and increased the complexity of his password from 4 digits to 6. Adams had done this, he claimed, to prevent members of his staff from inadvertently or intentionally deleting the contents of his phone because, according to Adams, he wished to preserve the contents of his phone due to the investigation. You hear that? He's just being a good citizen. He increased the complexity of his password to safeguard the material that the FBI was seeking. Now, get ready for this. This is the next sentence. But, Adams further claimed, he had forgotten the password that he had just set, and thus was unable to provide the FBI with a password that would unlock the phone. So, I'm sorry, officer. I changed my password to protect these documents for you, but wouldn't you know it, geez, I'm always doing stuff like this. I have such a bad memory. I completely forgot the new 6-digit password that I created. So you and I are not going to be able to go through these documents together. Oops, innocent mistake. My bad. But how else can I help you? Aside from these documents, what else can I do for you? So that's what's happening there. He's being indicted in the Southern District of New York. Damian Williams is the U.S. attorney for the Southern District. Kind of interesting, the people that he's gone after. He's got a couple of big names under his belt. He was a part of the prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell, achieving the sentence against her. That's Jeffrey Epstein's gal pal who was involved in all those awful things with underage girls. Sam Bankman-Fried he prosecuted, who, robbed so many Americans blind. Diddy, he just filed the charges against Diddy this past week, so that's a big one. Bob Menendez, that case also out of the Southern District of New York. So this guy in particular has a pretty big portfolio of guys he's going after. I know for conservatives, for everybody, it's like you always want a unified theory of everything. Like, why is the Justice Department doing this now? And we from the outside, we're mostly left to guessing and trying to piece together what we know and what this means. What we do know is that he definitely was attacking the Biden administration for the open borders. And then he was definitely pursued by the Biden administration after he did that. That is the order of events, clearly. But we also see here that we have this enterprising U.S. attorney who's going after all of these various figures. Some of whom seem very much like they deserve the prosecutions that they have either faced already or are facing now. Here's Damian Williams today, that U.S. attorney. I'll tell you more about him in a moment.
Never in my life.
Oh, excuse me. That's Eric Adams, right? That's not Damian Williams. Hey, Corey, let's check that cut. Cut 29. Looking for Damian Williams, the U.S. attorney from the Southern District of New York. He did say today that Eric Adams had solicited and accepted illegal campaign contributions, and he took $100,000 in luxury travel benefits, is what he announced. And so while we hold for that audio, let me just point out some of the stuff about Damian Williams that will lead you to think, well, this guy's an establishment Democrat, because he is. Damian Williams worked for John Kerry's 2004 presidential campaign in a couple of places, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, South Carolina. He was also a body man for Terry McAuliffe, meaning the top aide for Terry McAuliffe when he was the chairman of the DNC. Terry McAuliffe is about as establishment as any Democrat can get, as you know. He was a law clerk for Merrick Garland, the current attorney general, when Merrick Garland was a federal judge, U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. He was also a law clerk for Justice John Paul Stevens on the United States Supreme Court. So, and then this one, Chuck Schumer recommended him for the job. Chuck Schumer, the Democrat Party, Chuck Schumer in the Senate, recommended this guy for the gig of U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and then Joe Biden happily complied with that, nominated him in August of 2021. So is this guy the kind of guy who serves establishment Democrat interests? Well, looking back on his career, yeah, that's literally the people he was working for, these establishment Democrats. And it is definitely not in the interest of establishment Democrats right now to have one of their own in one of the biggest positions, the mayor of New York City, coming out and condemning them for the border crisis. So what happens next here? What happens next? Eric Adams is in a very interesting moment in American history right now. We are just weeks away, less than 6, from the 2024 presidential election. Eric Adams is being indicted now. They're going after him. I'm seeing a bunch of lefties saying, well, if that's happening, they're indicting a Democrat. Look at that. That means the Justice Department is totally fair. This justice is blind. They're not targeting Trump specifically. They go after people when they commit crimes. So that's, of course, already being used despite the many absurdities of that argument. It's already being used as a talking point that the media is retailing, running around with. But how's Eric Adams going to play this? What role is he going to play, if any, in the election? I'm kind of fascinated by all this. Right, we continue reacting to the indictment of the New York City Mayor Eric Adams by the Biden administration today. I want to take Chris in Thurmont on line 1. Hey, Chris, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, Vince.
Yes, sir.
I love how the left goes after their own when they get caught for not towing the line on their own their own narrative.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the whole Rod Blagojevich thing back in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
It is just hilarious.
Yeah.
I was go after them like bulldogs, unless you're like Bob Menendez or something like that.
You know, there's
try to defend them.
There's a lot to unpack here, but I agree with you on the core point. It's like you step out of line, they're going to find reasons to hurt you. You know, you have to stay in the fold. But you know, I think of a couple things. I'll table Rod Blagojevich for a moment because I think you're right about that. The other is in D.C. Trayon White. They're going after him for all sorts of corruption, federal bribery charges. And one of the things that we've discussed here on WMAL, and Chuck Thies is one of our experts that we have on from D.C., he points out Trayon White has no allies among the Democrats. So, like, you kind of think, like, everybody's corrupt. Like, a lot of these, especially D.C. officials, New York Democrats, like, everybody's palms getting greased by somebody. There's corruption all over the place. Why this guy? Why now? Why are they calling in the hit on this one particular guy? And usually you get to the end of it and you're like, that seems like the reason. He stepped out. He became a liability. Now, Rod Blagojevich, the reason I think he's so interesting is because, remember, he was saved from his prison sentence ultimately by Donald Trump. President Trump commuted the balance of his sentence. He served, I think, 8 years of 14. And the crime he was accused of was trying to sell Barack Obama's vacated Senate seat. Eric Adams, Chris, is in a really interesting moment right now because the election's coming. He's already spoken out about illegal immigration. He thinks the Biden administration is out to crush him. What does Eric Adams do with this? Does he come out full force? You know what? I'm riding with Trump. Does he say that? Does that happen in these waning weeks? Anything can. Everything does. You know what I mean? And does he start going after Kamala publicly in the hopes that Trump might save him from some sort of federal fate? I don't know. All I know is never pretend you know exactly what's going to happen next. Hey, I can tell you this, though. I know for sure that Emily Jashinsky will be with us right after the news. Well, good afternoon to you. It's 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Senator Ron Johnson is here. We'll detail what was in that big J13 report. How did the Secret Service fail so badly when it came to protecting President Trump? Andy Harris, the congressman, is with us at 4:30, and then Matthew Hurt, the chairman of the Republican Party in Arlington, joins us at 5:30, and we'll talk about our big event tomorrow. We're all going to be out there 8 o'clock in the morning to tailgate the vote with coffee and donuts. Join us if you'd like out at the Courthouse Plaza. And you can join us on the air today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Well, Stephanie Ruhle did it. She sucked up just enough to finally land the coveted chit-chat with Kamala Harris. And here's how they spent it.
Your opponent almost every day seems to be talking about this. So I just want to ask you yes or no. At any point in your life, have you served 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, working at a McDonald's? Yes or no? That's it.
I have. Okay.
Riveting. Amazing what we learned. Amazing. Emily Jashinsky joins us now. She's a correspondent at Unheard and the co-host of Counterpoints as well. Emily, good to talk to you today.
Hey, Vince. How's it going?
It's going great. What did you think of the MSNBC chit-chat with Kamala last night?
Oh, all of the highlights, or maybe lowlights. Or lowlights. One of the quotes, that was a little Freudian slip, but maybe accurate.
Yeah.
There was a great question where Stephanie Ruhle asked, Trump has said he will be the protector of women if elected. Can you respond to that? And another one where she said, for those who say these policies aren't for me, what do you say to them? I mean, these are just total fastballs just coming in there so hot, which is after, of course, Stephanie Ruhle went on Real Time with Bill Maher, like just literally days after, and made this impassioned, explicit case as to why people should vote for Kamala Harris. So no coincidence, of course, that the Harris campaign suddenly decided to give one of their very few interviews to Stephanie Ruhle, and then no coincidence, that's exactly how it turned out.
Stephanie Ruhle raised some real questions, I guess, is a way to put it, but it was they were dressed up in so much gushing and fawning that it was preposterous. But here is one that Kamala just couldn't handle, because Stephanie Ruhle said, look, you want to do all these things. You want to spend a lot of money. That's your plan is to spend a lot of money. So you keep saying you're going to raise corporate taxes. What happens if the Republicans control the Senate and you can't do that? Listen to Kamala wander around and be completely unfamiliar with the separation of powers.
If you can't raise corporate taxes, or if GOP takes control of the Senate, where do you get the money to do that? Do you still go forward with those plans and borrow?
Well, but we're going to have to raise corporate taxes, and we're going to have to make sure that the biggest corporations and billionaires pay their fair share. That's just it. It's about paying their fair share. I am not mad at anyone for achieving success, but everyone should pay their fair share, and it is not right that the teachers and the firefighters that I meet every day across our country are paying a higher tax than the richest people in our country.
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but she's a former senator who seems to have no idea how the Senate works.
Or she just doesn't want to answer the question, so she babbles. I mean, it's probably a combination of both. And to your point, I mean, Stephanie Ruhle is the senior business analyst. She worked for Deutsche Bank at NBC. She's the senior business analyst. Like, she's not dumb. She's very smart on economic issues and concerned. You know, she asked her question about salt deductions and salt caps and all of that good stuff. Like, she has this business background, so she was able to ask Kamala Harris some of those questions, even if I would say they were framed very gently and the pushback was very gentle as well. I mean, that's such a great opportunity for a journalist to jump in and say, Madam Vice President, with all due respect, what you're saying makes absolutely no sense. I asked you very specifically about raising, like, how you're going to do this monetarily, not whether you should raise corporate taxes, but how you're actually going to accomplish it. And instead, I mean, Kamala Harris just babbles. And even in a sort of softball interview setting, Kamala Harris just can't make it work that well. I mean, she took these awkward pauses. She got lost in her own words. It's really pathetic.
There was a moment where she was captivated by a single word. It's not the first time we've seen her do this, but she kept repeating the word holistically. And it must have really, she must have impressed herself, because she decided, I'm going to circle back to that. I'm going to keep taking a couple U-turns in my sentences and repeating the word holistically. Here she was last night.
Some of the work is going to be through what we do in terms of giving benefits and assistance to state and local governments around transit dollars, and looking holistically at the connection between that and housing, and looking holistically at the incentives we in the federal government can create for local and state governments to actually engage in planning in a holistic manner that includes prioritizing affordable housing for working people.
This kind of feels like a routine feature where she gets trapped in a cul-de-sac of her own creation. It's just like she says a word and then she's stuck around it for a while, like it has a gravitational pull.
I love the cul-de-sac metaphor, because it really is like that. And I think it's also, you know, when you didn't read the book and you have to give a book report in like third grade, and you know you have one word that describes it really well, like, you know that the book was like game changing.
Yeah.
You're just going to keep filling, you're going to keep like interspersing the word game changing with random filler. It's like what you did with the corporate tax rate thing too. She didn't really want to answer the question. She didn't have a great answer to the question. So she just kind of ignored it and started talking about how we need to raise the corporate taxes instead of actually answering the question. And here she knows that her sort of crutch is the word holistic, because she thinks that's they probably focus grouped it.
She really is the woman who's winging the oral exam. You know, she's always like, to tell us about war and peace. Well, there was war and there was peace. And I feel in a way that we kind of all know what that feels like, right? At times you feel like you're at war, and then other times you feel like you're at peace. Okay, and they're just like, "What are you saying?" She's like, "I'm hoping this sounds insightful." That's the plan. The border came up yesterday in no small part because Kamala Harris is trying to, for some reason, place emphasis on it. She's visiting the border tomorrow, or at least in some proximity to it in Arizona. Stephanie Ruhle asked her about this yesterday, and she said it's actually a Trump border crisis.
What would a Harris administration do for those communities who've taken in many, many legal immigrants but are at capacity?
Well, first of all, we do have a broken immigration system, and it needs to be fixed. And if we take a step back,
Who broke it?
months ago, some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress came together with others, proposed a border security
Some
bill
of the most conservative.
that would have put 1,500 new border agents on the border to help those hardworking border agents who are there right now working around the clock. Would have put more money into stemming the flow of fentanyl, which is killing Americans around our country and devastating communities. Would have put more resources into our ability to prosecute transnational criminal organizations, which in my career I've prosecuted. Donald Trump got word of the bill, realized it was going to fix a problem he wanted to run on, and told him to kill the bill, don't put it up for a vote. He killed a bill that would have actually been a solution because he wants to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And that's part of what needs to be addressed. And my pledge is that when elected president, if the American people will have me, I will bring that bill back and I will sign it into law. And we need a comprehensive plan that includes what we need to do to fortify not only our border, but deal with the fact that we also need to create pathways for people to earn citizenship.
All right, so she says our border's broken, it's in complete crisis, and whoever's in charge is really screwing everything up right now, and it's Trump's fault. Will you unpack that for us?
I mean, this is just an insane thing. This entire exchange was insane, both from the perspective of a journalist and from the vice president. Because, first of all, Stephanie Ruhle frames that question in, honestly, like, I'm glad she asked the question, but she framed it in the easiest possible way for Kamala Harris to answer, and then didn't follow up really at all by saying, under your administration, millions and millions of people have made dubious asylum claims, have been settled in communities around the country. Like, there's no context given to Kamala Harris. She's not confronted with any of the obvious failures of the administration that she's a part of. No interruption to say, with all due respect, Madam Vice President, you were called the quote border czar in media reports because you were delegated this responsibility specifically, and then millions and millions of people across. X number of people have been killed by migrants who weren't supposed to be here. X number of crimes have been committed. X number of people on the terrorist watch list, I think the number was like 60 last year, have come across the border under your administration. I mean, there's really none of that. It's all just so insane. It's farcical. And that's why you give an interview like this to Stephanie Ruhle.
Also, her rambling kind of concealed, I think, that may have been her single most radical answer as well of the entire interview. Because at the conclusion of her statement there, she said that her policy is going to be amnesty for all of the illegals who are in our country, which is wildly unpopular. In fact, the popular position as of this moment is mass deportation. The American public, on a bipartisan basis, would like for the illegal crisis to be over in the United States. And what you just heard from Kamala is that she would accelerate it, which I felt like, honestly, that was one of the glaring headlines that is probably not getting the attention it deserves from last night.
She also totally lied about the border bill. I mean, that description of the border bill that Trump allegedly rejected because it would be politically negative, which again is a myth that never happened, so it should be fact-checked in and of itself.
Right.
Means the border bill was a joke. It would let so many people come in. It would give the president so much discretion to close or open the border or keep it open as he pleases. So again, to let Kamala Harris, to ask her the question that way, to let her say what she just said, and to just be sort of laissez-faire and nonchalant about how insane the border policies have been and how insane her claims are. The whole thing, it's like, I can't even blame Kamala Harris for saying radical things because she knows she's not going to get pushback on them.
Well, that border legislation is a perfect example of the way the media just wills something into existence, because that story's been repeated over and over and over again without any basis whatsoever, ever. And the media will just reflexively repeat it, saying that, oh, Trump killed the border bill for his own political advantage. That's not true. It's never been grounded in any fact. There's never been a quote to support that. And in fact, the bill, she made it seem like, oh, all these conservatives were supporting it. It was James Lankford, and Mitch McConnell. They were pushing this along. Everybody else was opposed to this thing. The work permits that it created were a magnet for more illegal immigration into this country. It was normalizing upwards of 5,000 border crossings a day. And then the Border Patrol Union, which originally stuck its foot out to say, yeah, we're kind of for this, actually, because they wanted the funding. They ended up backing away from this as the news cycle progressed, and they realized how bad this bill was, and they started saying things like, well, we supported the framework. We wanted it to be amended. That never comes up in any of the coverage because the media is not trying to inform us, are they?
And nor do they have like good sources in the circles of like actual conservatives in the Senate or the House. And if they do, they just plainly don't listen to them because their confirmation bias is so strong. Because you and I, Vince, both remember through our own conversations and our own reporting. I mean, I talked to people just to try to chase the story down at the Federalist at the time. They were like, Donald Trump, I remember before Trump even weighed in on the bill, they were like horrified by what was being cooked up by James Lankford.
Yes.
And I remember them telling me like nobody could have gone back to their constituents. Nobody. And supported this Lankford bill. Lankford took so much heat from his own constituents. Everyone knew that if they had supported it, they knew it was a bad bill, and they knew politically it wasn't viable for them anyway. So Trump really had nothing to do with it, and there's plenty of evidence for that, not the alternative. So it's just such a fantasy land and a narrative that's really been constructed.
Let me finish with tariffs, because Stephanie Ruhle asked Kamala Harris a question on tariffs. That was, once again, as you point out, she does some economic coverage, so she's aware here that the Biden administration has actually clung to some of Donald Trump's tariffs against China. So she wants her to explain, why are you attacking Trump for wanting tariffs, yet the Biden-Harris administration has kept them? Take a listen to this.
Tariffs aren't unique to President Trump. President Biden has tariffs in place. He's actually looking to potentially implement more. Where do you come out on? Is there a good tariff, a bad tariff?
Well, part of it is you don't just throw around the idea of just tariffs across the board, and that's part of the problem with Donald Trump. Frankly, and I say this in all sincerity, he's just not very serious about how he thinks about some of these issues. And one must be serious and have a plan.
Okay, so she doesn't really give an answer. And right after the interview last night, Stephanie Ruhle appears on screen with the MSNBC host whose show it was, and she said this, that it's okay that she didn't give me an answer.
So tariffs, if used in the right places, can work. And one could watch that and say, well, she didn't give a clear, direct answer. That's okay, because we are not talking about clear or direct issues.
I just can't even imagine. Look, you and I have been journalists for some time. We know a lot of journalists. I can't imagine a single one of them saying, yeah, that's okay they didn't give me a clear or direct answer. I don't need one of those.
Yeah, no, nobody has any use for those. I mean, this is obviously why Stephanie Ruhle got the interview, because, again, this is not a campaign that's doing a bunch of press. They're not doing press conferences. They're really not doing sit-downs. They're at pace to do historically low number of interactions with the press, despite being the champions of lowercase d democracy and all of that good stuff. And so for Stephanie Ruhle to then come out and, even after Kamala Harris's answer, Stephanie Ruhle, in the middle of the interview, agreed with Kamala Harris and said, yeah, when you lay it out like that, Donald Trump doesn't have a very serious plan, instead of, again, being like, what are you actually talking about? What would you actually do? Why is this any different? What would you do any differently? I mean, it's totally to be expected. It was completely normal. And that's funny enough what Stephanie Ruhle said when Chris Hayes complimented her after the interview aired. She was like, Chris, that's very nice, but I think what you mean is that it was just a normal interview, because Hayes called it refreshingly substantive. It's like, no, it was normal because it was slobbering.
That's so North Korean of them. That's it's totally in character for MSNBC. But it's just, how many people across the country do interviews for jobs every day where they do more preparation and put in more effort just to sound impressive so they get the job than Kamala Harris put in yesterday? And it's not like that job's important or anything. President of the United States. Why prepare? Just wing it. Thank you very much, Emily Jashinsky, for all of your excellent work and your time today.
Thanks, Vince.
Great to talk to you. That's Emily Jashinsky with Unheard and Counterpoints. Chris is calling in from Virginia. He's on line 1. Hello, Chris. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Vince, hello. I was calling about Eric Adams, Trayon White,
Yeah.
and Bob Menendez. my theory on why they're all indicted is they refuse to give 10% to the big guy.
So they weren't spreading the wealth around, as you point out. They were being a little too greedy, taking all that money for themselves, huh?
Right. I'm thinking that when the Biden administration seized power in 2020, they sent bagmen to all the Democrat-run cities and said, this is how we're going to do it now. And those three probably refused.
And all of a sudden, they find themselves on the wrong end of the Biden administration's Justice Department. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating to watch what's going on. Of course, the Biden family, according to congressional reports, has taken $27 million in foreign contributions. For what? What was that for? For Hunter's amateur porn career? I don't think so. I think they were buying something else, honestly. Coming up, Senator Ron Johnson joins us with the latest on July 13th. How did President Trump get shot in the head? And Congressman Andy Harris is here in the next hour as well. Stay with us.